If you thought Joe McNamara was already dealing with enough pressure, the promo for Special Ops Lioness Season 3 Episode 3 suggests the real danger may be much closer than anyone realizes. The episode is titled The Bear is Infected, and the official synopsis says Joe confronts a breach that pushes the team into a risky operation to identify infiltrators. Episode 3 is scheduled for August 16, 2026 on Paramount+. But that title may be the biggest clue of all. Because when Lioness talks about an infection, it does not necessarily mean the enemy is attacking from the outside. It could mean the system itself has already been compromised. And that changes everything. At the end of Episode 2, Joe was already questioning whether the people surrounding the operation were telling her the truth. After being kidnapped by Russian operatives, surviving interrogation, and discovering that the tracker planted on her had been removed, Joe had every reason to believe the attack was more sophisticated than a simple hit. Her suspicion eventually turned toward a Ukrainian operative connected to the mission, forcing crews, techs, and Kyle into a dangerous extraction for answers. Now Episode 3 appears to take that suspicion to the next level. The phrase "the bear is infected" sounds like a warning that something powerful has been contaminated from within. The bear could represent the American intelligence apparatus, the Lioness operation itself, or even the wider network Joe has been depending on to keep her team alive. And if that interpretation is correct, Joe has a problem she cannot solve with a normal tactical operation. She cannot simply identify the enemy. She has to figure out who she can still trust. That is where the promo becomes especially interesting. Joe confronting a breach means someone may have gained access to information, plans, personnel, or operations that were supposed to be protected. In a world like Lioness, a breach is not just a security failure. It can become a death sentence. Because if an infiltrator knows where the team is going, who they are targeting, and how they operate, every mission becomes a potential ambush. And Joe knows that better than anyone. The biggest twist could therefore be that the team is no longer hunting an enemy who is hiding somewhere overseas. The enemy could already be inside the operation. That would explain why Joe appears to be pushing the team toward a risky play. If she cannot trust the information coming through normal channels, she may have to create a situation where the infiltrator exposes themselves. And that is classic Joe. She does not need to know everything. She only needs to know enough to set the trap. But there is another layer to this. Joe's biggest strength has always been her ability to read people under pressure. She understands fear. She understands loyalty. And more importantly, she understands what people do when they believe they are about to be exposed. That means Episode 3 could become less about a conventional firefight and more about psychological warfare. Joe may intentionally feed different pieces of information to different people, watch where that information ends up, and use the resulting movement to identify the leak. If that happens, someone close to the operation could suddenly become the prime suspect. And that is where the infected metaphor becomes terrifying. An infection spreads. One compromised person can compromise another. One leak can expose an entire network. One betrayal can destroy years of intelligence work. And once Joe realizes that, she may have no choice but to become ruthless. The official description specifically says the team will attempt to root out infiltrators, which strongly suggests this episode is going to expand the betrayal storyline rather than immediately resolve it. But who is the infiltrator? That is the question the promo wants viewers to ask. And there are several possibilities. It could be someone connected to the Ukrainian operation. It could be someone inside the American intelligence structure. Or the breach could be much larger than Joe initially understands, involving a network that has been manipulating events from behind the scenes. Season 3 has already been framed around hidden networks, foreign operatives, and personal betrayals colliding around Joe's world. Paramount's own Season 3 material describes Joe as facing enemies operating in the shadows, while the conflict begins reaching into every part of her life. That makes the Episode 3 title feel deliberately chosen. The bear is infected, not attacked, not surrounded, infected. There is a difference. An attack comes from outside. An infection means something has already gotten inside. And if Lioness is following that idea, Joe's greatest threat may not be the person holding the weapon. It may be the person standing beside her. That could also put Cruz in an extremely dangerous position. Cruz has always been one of Joe's most valuable assets, but Lioness repeatedly tests the psychological limits of its operatives. The deeper Joe goes into this investigation, the more difficult it becomes to separate operational necessity from personal trust. And Joe cannot afford to make the wrong decision. If she falsely accuses someone loyal, she could fracture her own team. But if she trusts the wrong person, the next mission could end with someone dead. That is the dilemma episode 3 appears to be building toward. And there is one final possibility that makes the promo even more intriguing. What if Joe herself is part of the infection? Not literally, but strategically. After being kidnapped, Joe may have been exposed to information, surveillance, or manipulation that the enemy expects her to carry back into the CIA. If the Russians wanted more than her death, then perhaps the kidnapping was designed to create uncertainty inside the organization. Maybe they wanted Joe to start questioning everyone. Maybe they wanted her to pull the team into exactly the kind of internal investigation that could destabilize the operation. And if that is the real game, then Joe could be walking directly into a trap without realizing it. That is why The Bear is Infected could become one of the most important episodes of Special Ops, Lioness Season 3. The question is no longer simply, who is attacking Joe? The question is, who has already gotten inside? Joe is about to test the loyalty of everyone around her. And when the Lioness starts hunting for an infiltrator, the person she trusts the most could be the person she should fear the most. Episode 3 arrives August 16th. And if this promo is giving us the right clues, Joe's next mission may not be about finding the enemy. It may be about discovering that the enemy has been there all along,